His hands had killed men. Broken bones, gripped motorcycle handles through 1,000 miles of highway. They had never trembled, not once in 52 years. But now, kneeling in the snow, Marcus Iron Cole watched his fingers shake like leaves in a storm. The bundle in his arms wasn't rags. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 5 years old. Her face was purple, black, swollen shut. Blood dried at the corner of her mouth. Fresh cuts carved into skin that should have known only softness. She weighed nothing, like holding a ghost. And the Hells Angels' hands would not stop trembling. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment below which city you're watching from, so we can see how far this story has traveled. Now back to the story. The winter storm had been building all day, and Marcus knew better than to be out in it. 52 years of hard living had taught him to respect nature's fury, even if he didn't respect much else. But his truck had other plans, sputtering and dying 3 blocks from the welding shop he'd owned for the past decade. "Piece of garbage," he muttered, slamming the door hard enough to shake snow from the roof. The wind cut through his leather jacket like it wasn't even there. Detroit winters were brutal, and this one was shaping up to be the worst in years. Most sensible people were inside, huddled around heaters watching television. But Marcus had never been accused of being sensible. He started walking his heavy boots, punching through the fresh powder with each step. The industrial district was dead at this hour, all the warehouses locked up tight, their windows dark and empty, just the way Marcus liked it. Quiet, alone. No one asking questions or expecting anything from him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Probably one of his brothers from the club wondering if he was coming to the bar tonight. He wasn't in the mood. Hadn't been in the mood for months now, if he was being honest. Something had shifted in him lately, a restlessness he couldn't name, a feeling that his life had become nothing but empty routines leading nowhere. The snow fell harder, thick white curtains that reduced visibility to almost nothing. Marcus ducked his head and pushed forward, thinking about the bottle of whiskey waiting for him at home, about the silence of his empty house, about another night spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all there was. He almost walked right past it, just a dark shape against the white, pressed up against the chain-link fence of an abandoned warehouse. His first thought was garbage, maybe a bag of trash blown over by the wind. But something made him stop. Something made him look twice. The shape was too small, too still, too human. Marcus changed direction, his boots moving faster now, crunching through the snow with new urgency. His heart, usually steady as a drum, began to race. 10 feet away, he could see it wasn't garbage at all. 5 feet away, his stomach dropped. It was a child. A little girl lying face down in the snow, wearing nothing but a thin summer dress. No coat, no shoes. Her bare feet were blue with cold, and she wasn't moving. Wasn't moving at all. "Hey!" Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, the cold instantly soaking through his jeans. "Hey, kid." No response, no movement, nothing. His hands, the same hands that had thrown punches and gripped motorcycle handles and never once failed him, began to shake. He couldn't make them stop. Carefully, gently, he turned her over. Her face destroyed him. Purple and black bruises covered her cheeks, her forehead, her jaw. One eye was swollen completely shut. Dried blood caked the corner of her mouth, and fresh cuts marked her skin in patterns that spoke of deliberate cruelty. She was maybe 5 years old, maybe younger. It was hard to tell through all the damage. "Oh, God," Marcus breathed. "Oh, Jesus Christ." He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching desperately for a pulse. For a long, terrible moment, he felt nothing. Then there, faint, fluttering, like a butterfly's wings beating against his fingertips. Barely there, but there. She was alive. Without thinking, Marcus stripped off his leather jacket and wrapped it around her tiny body. The cold hit him immediately, biting into his skin, but he didn't care. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, and started moving. "Hold on," he said, his voice rougher than he'd ever heard it. "Just hold on, kid." She weighed nothing. That was what struck him most as he moved as fast as he dared through the treacherous snow. A child this age should have some weight to her, some substance, but she was just bones and bruises light as a handful of feathers, and that scared him more than anything else. His motorcycle was parked 3 blocks away near the shop. He didn't have a car, didn't want one, had always preferred the freedom of 2 wheels. But now, carrying this broken little girl through a blizzard, he cursed himself for that choice. "Stay with me," he kept saying over and over. "I'm gonna get you help. Just stay with me." Her head lolled against his chest, completely limp. He could feel her shallow breaths through his shirt, each one a small miracle he was terrified would stop. The snow stung his face, and his hands grew numb from cold, but he didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. The motorcycle appeared through the white curtain of snow, and Marcus had never been so relieved to see anything in his life. He climbed on awkwardly, keeping the girl pressed tight against his chest with one arm, while he started the engine with the other. The Harley roared to life, its familiar rumble somehow comforting in the chaos. "Few more minutes," he promised her. "Just a few more minutes." He drove faster than was safe, the bike's tires fighting for traction on the snow-covered streets. The hospital was 6 blocks away, and each one felt like a mile. The wind cut through his thin shirt, turning his exposed skin to ice, but the girl stayed warm against him, wrapped in his jacket, breathing those tiny, precious breaths. The emergency room entrance appeared like a beacon in the storm, its lights cutting through the darkness. Marcus didn't bother with the parking lot. He drove right up to the doors, killed the engine, and was inside before the bike had fully stopped. "Need help here?" His voice echoed off the sterile walls, making the few people in the waiting room jump. "I need help right now." A nurse looked up from her station, her eyes widening as she took in the scene, a massive tattooed biker cradling a small broken child. To her credit, she didn't hesitate. She was on her feet and calling for assistance before Marcus had taken 3 steps. "What happened?" she asked, already guiding him toward a gurney that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Found her in the snow," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Outside the old Riverside warehouse. She's been beaten bad. I don't know how long she was out there." Medical staff swarmed around them, taking the girl from his arms and placing her on the gurney with practiced efficiency. He didn't want to let go. His hand seemed to resist his fingers clinging to the jacket still wrapped around her. But they pulled her away, wheeling her through double doors that swung shut behind them, and suddenly Marcus was standing alone in the middle of the emergency room. His shirt was soaked with melted snow. His hands were shaking worse than ever, and he couldn't get the image of her face out of his mind, those bruises, those cuts, that swollen eye. Someone had done that to her. Someone had hurt a child that small, that helpless, with deliberate cruelty. A rage unlike anything he'd ever felt began to build in his chest. "Sir?" A young nurse approached him cautiously, probably warned by his appearance. "Sir, you should sit down. You look like you're in shock." "I'm fine," Marcus said, but he wasn't. He wasn't fine at all. "You're bleeding." He looked down. His hands were scraped raw, probably from when he'd fallen to his knees in the snow. He hadn't even noticed. "It's nothing. At least let me clean those for you. And we'll need to ask you some questions. The police will want to talk to you." Police. Right. Of course there would be police. A child beaten nearly to death didn't happen without someone asking questions. Marcus nodded numbly and let the nurse guide him to a plastic chair that creaked under his weight. Time became strange after that. Minutes felt like hours. The waiting room clock ticked away with merciless consistency, while Marcus sat in his wet clothes staring at the double doors through which they'd taken the girl. Other people came and went, a man with a bleeding cut on his forehead, a woman with a crying baby, an elderly couple speaking in hushed, worried tones, but Marcus barely registered their presence. All he could think about was her face. Those bruises, that blood, the impossible lightness of her body in his arms. "Mr. Cole." He looked up. A doctor stood before him, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a grave expression. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "That's me," Marcus said, rising to his feet. "How is she? Is she going to be okay?" The doctor's expression didn't change, and that scared him. "Why don't you sit back down, Mr. Cole? Just tell me." She paused, then nodded. "The girl is in a coma. She's suffered severe trauma, multiple contusions, a fractured rib malnutrition. Some of the injuries are fresh, but others..." She hesitated. "Others are older. Weeks, maybe months old. This wasn't a single incident. This has been ongoing." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat down heavily, his legs suddenly unable to support him. "Ongoing," he repeated. "Someone's been hurting her. For months." "It appears so, yes. We've contacted the police and social services. They'll want to speak with you about how you found her." "What about her family? Where are her parents?" The doctor's jaw tightened. "We're still working on identifying her. She had no ID, no belongings. We're hoping the police can help with that." Marcus stared at the floor, his mind reeling. A little girl beaten and starved and left to freeze in the snow. Someone out there had done this to her. Someone out there was responsible, and right now that someone was walking free while she fought for her life. "Can I see her?" The question surprised him, even as he asked it. He didn't know this child. She was nothing to him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was connected to her somehow, that finding her in that snow had meant something. The doctor studied him for a long moment. "Normally, only family is allowed in the ICU. But given the circumstances," she sighed. "She doesn't have anyone else right now. I'll see what I can do." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the doorway of a small room in the intensive care unit. The girl lay in a bed that seemed far too big for her, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and monitored every fragile sign of life. Tubes connected her to IV bags, and a thick bandage wrapped around her head. The bruises on her face looked even worse under the harsh fluorescent lights. He walked to the chair beside her bed and sat down, the plastic creaking under his weight. Up close, she looked even smaller. Her hands resting on top of the white hospital blanket were tiny things, her fingers thin and delicate. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face, revealing the true extent of the damage beneath. "Hey, kid," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the one who found you, out there in the snow." He paused, not sure why he was talking to an unconscious child, not sure what he expected to accomplish. "Name's Marcus. Don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted you to know you're not alone." "Okay. You're not alone anymore." The machines beeped their steady rhythm. The girl didn't move. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. He should go home. He should change out of these wet clothes, get some sleep. Let the professionals handle things. This wasn't his responsibility. This wasn't his problem. But he couldn't make himself leave. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. The night shift gave way to the morning shift, and still Marcus sat in that plastic chair, watching over a child whose name he didn't even know. His back ached. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. But every time he thought about getting up and walking away, something stopped him. It was her hands, he realized. Those tiny hands lying so still on the blanket. They reminded him of something, of someone, though he couldn't quite grasp the memory. It hovered at the edge of his consciousness, painful and persistent. Around 7 in the morning, a woman appeared in the doorway. She wore a navy blue blazer and carried a thick folder of papers, her expression professional, but kind. "Mr. Cole," she asked. "I'm Sarah Mitchell from Social Services. I understand you're the one who found her." Marcus nodded, his throat dry from hours of silence. Sarah walked into the room, her eyes moving to the girl in the bed. Something in her expression shifted, a flicker of pain quickly controlled. "Her name is Emma," she said softly. "Emma Tate. She's 5 years old." Emma. The name settled over Marcus like a weight. "Emma," he repeated. "We've been able to locate some information about her situation." Sarah pulled up another chair and sat down, opening her folder. Her parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. Since then, she's been living with her uncle Raymond Tate. "The uncle," Marcus said. "He's the one who did this to her." Sarah's pause told him everything he needed to know. "We've had reports about the household before. Neighbors calling about, shouting about a child crying at all hours. But Mr. Tate was always convincing. He's a charming man, apparently. Knew how to talk his way out of investigations." The rage that had been building in Marcus's chest flared white-hot. "So you knew," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You people knew something was wrong, and you left her there anyway." "The system isn't perfect, Mr. Cole. We have limited resources, and there are protocols." "Protocols?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A little girl is lying here in a coma because of your protocols." Sarah didn't flinch from his anger. "You're right," she said simply. "We failed her. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." She looked at Emma, at the bandages and the bruises. "But right now what matters is what happens next. Raymond Tate has disappeared. We think he realized how badly he'd hurt her this time and ran. The police are looking for him. And when they find him, he'll be arrested, charged. But in the meantime, Emma needs somewhere to go when she recovers. If she recovers." Sarah's voice caught slightly on those words. "We'll be looking for foster placement, but her situation is complicated. Many families aren't equipped to handle a child with her level of trauma." Marcus stared at the woman, then at Emma. 5 years old. Orphaned, abused, nearly killed by the one person who was supposed to protect her. And now she'd wake up, if she woke up, to find herself surrounded by strangers, shuffled through a system that had already failed her once. "What if someone wanted to help?" he heard himself ask. "What if someone wanted to make sure she was okay?" Sarah studied him carefully. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Mr. Cole?" Was he? Marcus didn't know. 24 hours ago, he'd been a loner, a man who valued his freedom above everything else. He didn't do attachments, didn't do responsibility. He'd built his entire life around avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. But something had changed when he'd found Emma in that snow. Something had shifted inside him, some wall had cracked, and he couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. "I don't know what I'm asking," he admitted. I can't walk away from her. I know that doesn't make sense. I know I'm probably the last person who should be Mr. Cole." Sarah cut him off, her expression thoughtful. "In my experience, the people who think they're unqualified to care for children are often the ones who end up being the best at it, the ones who know they have something to prove." Marcus looked at Emma again. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. She was so small, so broken, so alone. "What would I have to do?" he asked. The next few days blurred together in a haze of paperwork and hospital visits. Marcus went through the motions of his normal life, opening the shop, fixing engines, eating meals he barely tasted, but his mind was always elsewhere. Always in that small hospital room, with that small girl waiting for any sign that she was coming back. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "Her vital signs are stable," they told him. "The swelling in her brain is going down, but we won't know the full extent of the damage until she wakes up." If she wakes up. They didn't say those words out loud, but Marcus heard them anyway. He started bringing things to her room. A small teddy bear he'd found at a gas station. A children's book that the nurse had recommended. He felt foolish sitting beside an unconscious child reading stories about rabbits and bears and magical kingdoms, but the nurses said she might be able to hear him that familiar voices and sounds could help bring patients out of comas. So he read. Night after night, his gruff voice stumbling over words meant for children, he read. "You're good with her," one of the nurses commented one evening. "Have you had children before?" Marcus shook his head. "Never. Don't know the first thing about kids." "Could have fooled me." She smiled kindly. "The way you talk to her, the way you hold her hand. It's natural." Natural. Marcus turned the word over in his mind long after the nurse had gone. Nothing about this felt natural. It felt terrifying and overwhelming and completely beyond his capabilities. And yet he couldn't stop coming back. On the 5th night, something changed. Marcus was reading The Velveteen Rabbit, a story about a toy that becomes real through love. His voice had grown hoarse from reading, but he kept going, determined to finish the chapter before heading home. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day. He read aloud. And then he saw it. A twitch. Just a small movement, barely visible, but definitely there. Emma's fingers lying on top of the blanket had moved. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. "Emma, can you hear me?" Another twitch. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling to open. He hit the call button with one hand while keeping the other wrapped around her tiny fingers. "Come on, kid," he urged. "Come back. You can do it." Her eyes opened. They were green, he realized, bright green even through the haze of pain and medication. They wandered around the room, unfocused, confused, until finally they landed on his face. Marcus held his breath. This was the moment. She would see a stranger, a large, intimidating man covered in tattoos, and she would scream. She would be terrified. She would, "You?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "You found me." The words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. She recognized him. Somehow unconsciously, she had known he was there. "Yeah, kid," he managed to say, his own voice rough with emotion. "I found you." Her small hand squeezed his weak but deliberate. "Are you staying?" It wasn't a question. It was a plea. A desperate, heartbreaking plea from a child who had learned that adults couldn't be trusted, that safety was an illusion, that the people who were supposed to love her would only bring pain. Marcus looked into those green eyes, saw the fear and the hope warring within them, and felt something inside him crack wide open. "Yeah, Emma," he said, squeezing her hand back. "I'm staying." The first week after Emma woke up was the hardest of Marcus's life. Harder than the years he'd spent on the streets as a teenager. Harder than the fights that had left scars across his knuckles. Harder than anything he'd ever faced, because this time the stakes weren't his own survival. They were hers. She barely spoke. That was the thing that got to him most. The doctor said it was normal that children who'd experienced severe trauma often retreated into silence as a defense mechanism. But watching her lie in that hospital bed, her green eyes following him around the room without a word, made Marcus feel helpless in a way he'd never experienced before. "You need to be patient," Sarah Mitchell told him during one of her daily visits. "Trust doesn't come easily to children like Emma. It has to be earned." "How?" Marcus asked, frustration bleeding through his voice. "How do I earn the trust of a kid who's been taught that every adult in her life is going to hurt her?" Sarah looked at him with something like compassion. "You show up. Every day. No matter what. That's how." So Marcus showed up. Every single day, rain or shine, he walked through those hospital doors and took his place in the chair beside Emma's bed. He brought her things, coloring books, crayons, stuffed animals, even though she barely touched them. He read to her even though she never responded. He talked to her about nothing and everything, filling the silence with his gruff voice, because the alternative was a quiet that felt too much like giving up. On the third day, something changed. Marcus was reading from a picture book about a brave little mouse when he heard it. A sound so small he almost missed it. He looked up to find Emma watching him, her lips moving silently. "What's that, kid?" he asked, leaning closer. "I didn't catch that." "Again," Emma whispered. "Read it again." It was the first word she'd spoken to him since asking if he was staying. Marcus's throat tightened, and he had to clear it before he could respond. "Sure thing," he said, turning back to the first page. "Let's start from the beginning." He read that book 4 times that afternoon. Each time he finished, Emma would whisper, "Again," and each time Marcus would turn back to the first page without hesitation. By the 5th reading, his voice was hoarse, and his back ached from hunching over the small book, but he would have read it 100 more times if she'd asked. The nurses noticed the change immediately. "She's responding to you," Dr. Patterson said during her evening rounds. "That's a very good sign. Keep doing whatever you're doing." What he was doing was falling apart inside. Every time he looked at Emma, at the bruises still fading on her face, at the way she flinched when anyone moved too quickly near her, at the fear that never quite left her eyes, he felt a rage building in his chest that scared him with its intensity. Raymond Tate was still out there somewhere. The police had followed leads to 3 different cities, but the man had vanished like smoke. Every night, Marcus lay awake, thinking about what he would do if he ever found Emma's uncle. The thoughts weren't pretty, they weren't legal, but they were honest. "Mr. Cole," a nurse appeared in the doorway. "There's a detective here to see you." Marcus looked at Emma, who had finally fallen asleep with the mouse book clutched to her chest. "Stay with her," he said. "I'll be right back." The detective was a tired-looking man in his 50s, with a coffee stain on his tie and eyes that had seen too much. He introduced himself as Detective Frank Morrison and shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was stronger than expected. "I've been assigned to Emma's case," Morrison said. "I understand you're the one who found her." "That's right." "And you've been visiting her every day since." Marcus crossed his arms. "Is that a problem?" "No." Morrison studied him for a long moment. "Actually, it's refreshing. Most people in your situation would have dropped her off at the hospital and never looked back. You stayed. She needed someone to stay." Morrison nodded slowly. "We found Raymond Tate's apartment. It's been cleaned out, but we recovered some evidence. Photographs. Documents." He paused, his jaw tightening. "What that man did to his niece. I've been doing this job for 23 years, Mr. Cole. I don't shock easy anymore. But this case—" "What did you find?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I can't share the details of an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you that when we catch him, and we will catch him, he's going away for a very long time." "When you catch him," Marcus repeated. "Not if." "When?" Morrison handed him a business card. "If you hear anything, see anything, learn anything that might help us find him, you call me, day or night. Understand?" Marcus took the card and slipped it into his pocket. "Understood." After Morrison left, Marcus stood in the hospital hallway for a long time, staring at nothing. The rage inside him had grown cold and hard, like iron cooling in a forge. Raymond Tate had hurt Emma for years, had broken her bones and bruised her skin and left her to die in a snowstorm. And somewhere out there, he was still breathing, still walking free while she lay in a hospital bed trying to remember how to trust. It wasn't right. None of it was right. Marcus walked back to Emma's room and found her awake, her green eyes fixed on the doorway as if she'd been waiting for him. "You came back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you I would." "People say that." Her small fingers twisted in the hospital blanket. "They say they'll come back, but they don't." Marcus pulled his chair closer to her bed and sat down heavily. "I'm not people," he said. "When I say something, I mean it." Emma studied his face with an intensity that seemed far too old for her 5 years. "Promise, promise." Something shifted in her expression then. Not quite trust, not yet, but the first crack in the wall she'd built around herself. It was enough. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Marcus would arrive at the hospital every morning before his shift at the welding shop reading to Emma until she fell asleep. Then he'd work for a few hours, his mind never fully on the job, before returning for the afternoon. The nurses started saving him a cup of coffee. The doctors started including him in their updates. Somewhere along the way, without anyone officially deciding it, Marcus had become part of Emma's care team. "You're good for her," Dr. Patterson told him one morning. "Her recovery has been remarkable since you started visiting. Most children with her level of trauma take months to show this kind of progress." "She's a fighter," Marcus said. "Tougher than she looks." "That may be true, but she also has something to fight for now. Someone, I should say." The doctor gave him a meaningful look. "Have you given any more thought to the custody situation?" Marcus had thought of little else. The paperwork Sarah Mitchell had given him sat on his kitchen table at home, half-filled and abandoned. Every time he tried to complete it, doubt crept in. What did he know about raising a kid? He was a loner, a biker, a man who'd spent his whole life avoiding responsibility. What could he possibly offer a traumatized little girl? "I'm thinking about it," he said. "Don't think too long." Dr. Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. "She's going to be released soon. If there's no permanent placement arranged, she'll go into the foster system. And given her history..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus knew what happened to damaged children in the system. Shuffled from home to home, never staying long enough to form connections, never healing from their wounds. He'd seen it happen to kids in his old neighborhood. Some of them had ended up in gangs. Some of them had ended up dead. That night, Marcus sat by Emma's bed long after visiting hours had ended. The nurses had stopped trying to kick him out. He had a feeling Dr. Patterson had said something to them. Emma was asleep, her small hand resting on top of his larger one, her breathing steady and peaceful. "What am I supposed to do, kid?" he whispered. "I don't know anything about being a father. I don't know how to fix what's broken in you. I don't even know how to fix what's broken in me." Emma stirred in her sleep, her fingers tightening around his. "But I know I can't let you go." Marcus continued, his voice rough. "I know I can't walk away from you. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's where it starts." He stayed until dawn, watching her sleep, making plans he never thought he'd make. The next morning, Marcus walked into the social services office with his completed paperwork. Sarah Mitchell looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her professional features. "Mr. Cole, I wasn't expecting you." "I want to do it," Marcus said, placing the papers on her desk. "I want to be her guardian. Whatever it takes, whatever hoops I have to jump through, I'm in." Sarah picked up the paperwork, scanning through the pages. "You understand what this means: background checks, home visits, parenting classes. The court will scrutinize every aspect of your life." "I know. Your history with the Hells Angels will come up. Your arrest record." "I know. Some people will say you're not fit to raise a child. They'll say you're too rough, too old, too." "I know." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "But here's what else I know. That little girl has been through hell. She's been beaten and starved and thrown away like garbage. And right now she's lying in a hospital bed, terrified that everyone who's supposed to take care of her is going to hurt her instead." His voice hardened. "I'm not going to hurt her. I'm going to protect her. I'm going to make sure she never feels that kind of fear again. And if that means jumping through hoops and taking classes and letting people poke around in my life, then that's what I'll do." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, she smiled. "I believe you, Mr. Cole. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've learned to tell the difference between people who want to help and people who actually will." She straightened the papers and placed them in a folder. "I'll start processing these today." Marcus nodded, relief flooding through him. "What happens next?" "Next, we convince a judge. And that won't be easy." Sarah's expression grew serious. "But I'll be in your corner. Emma deserves someone who's willing to fight for her." "She'll have it," Marcus said. "Whatever it takes." 2 days later, Emma was released from the hospital. Marcus had spent every free moment preparing his small house for her arrival, clearing out the motorcycle parts that cluttered the living room, buying sheets with cartoon characters on them, stocking the refrigerator with foods he thought a child might like. He had no idea what he was doing, but he was doing it anyway. The drive home was quiet. Emma sat in the back seat of the used sedan Marcus had bought specifically for this purpose. His motorcycle was no place for a child. Her eyes wide as she watched the city pass by outside the window. She hadn't said much since learning she was leaving the hospital, and Marcus didn't push. He was learning that patience was part of this, that he couldn't force her to open up before she was ready. When they pulled into his driveway, Emma's grip on her stuffed bear tightened. "This is home," Marcus said, turning off the engine. "You're home now, for as long as you want it." Emma didn't move. Her green eyes were fixed on the house, and Marcus could see the fear in them. Another new place, another stranger claiming to want the best for her. How many times had she heard those promises before? "I know you're scared," Marcus said quietly. "I know, you've got no reason to trust me, but I'm going to prove myself to you, Emma. Every single day I'm going to show you that you're safe here, that I'm not going to hurt you, that I'm not going anywhere." Emma's lower lip trembled. "What if you change your mind?" "I won't." "But what if you do?" Marcus turned in his seat to face her fully. "You know how I found you that night in the snow?" She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Something happened when I picked you up. Something I can't explain. It was like I'd been walking around with this empty space inside me, and I didn't even know it was there until you filled it." He struggled to find the right words, this man who had never been good with words. "I'm not going to change my mind, Emma, because changing my mind would mean going back to being empty, and I can't do that. Not anymore." A single tear slipped down Emma's cheek. She didn't say anything, but she unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed out of the car, still clutching her bear. Marcus got out too, moving around to walk beside her up the path to the front door. Inside, Emma stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The house was nothing fancy. Worn furniture, bare walls, a fireplace that hadn't been used in years, but it was clean and warm and safe. "Your room is this way," Marcus said, leading her down the short hallway. He pushed open a door to reveal the small bedroom he'd prepared. A bed with the cartoon sheets, a dresser painted white, a bookshelf filled with the same books he'd been reading to her at the hospital. "If you don't like something, we can change it. This is your space." Emma walked into the room slowly, her fingers trailing along the edge of the bed. She picked up one of the books from the shelf, the one about the brave little mouse, and held it against her chest along with her bear. "Can you read to me?" she asked, her voice small. "Like you did at the hospital." "Of course," Marcus said, his throat tight. "Whenever you want." That night, he sat on the edge of her bed and read the mouse book 3 times through. Emma fell asleep somewhere in the middle of the third, reading, her small hand wrapped around his finger, her breathing finally peaceful. Marcus didn't move for a long time. He just sat there watching her sleep, feeling the warmth of her hand in his, and wondering how something so small and broken had managed to crack open his heart. The days that followed were a series of small battles and smaller victories. Emma had nightmares every night, waking up screaming for someone to stop, to please stop. And Marcus learned to be there the moment her eyes flew open to gather her in his arms and hold her until the shaking stopped. "You're safe," he would tell her over and over. "I've got you. You're safe." Sometimes she believed him, sometimes she didn't. But he kept saying it anyway, kept proving it with every gentle touch and patient word and moment spent just being present. He learned things about being a parent that no book could teach, like how to make macaroni and cheese that wasn't too hot or too cold, like how to check for monsters under the bed and in the closet, taking the job seriously, because to Emma, those monsters were real, like how to braid hair badly, always badly, but trying anyway because she asked him to. The first time Emma laughed was 3 weeks after she came to live with him. Marcus had been attempting to make pancakes, and they'd come out looking like misshapen blobs instead of circles. He'd been frustrated, muttering under his breath about stupid batter and worthless pans when he heard it. A giggle, small and rusty like a door that hadn't been opened in years, but unmistakably a laugh. He turned to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, her hand over her mouth, her eyes bright with something that looked almost like joy. "They look like clouds," she said, pointing at his failed pancakes. "Funny clouds." Marcus stared at her, at this little girl who had been through so much and still found a reason to laugh, and felt his heart swell to bursting. "You're right," he said, his voice gruff to hide the emotion. "Funny clouds it is. Want some?" She nodded, and they ate the misshapen pancakes together, and Marcus silently vowed to make them that way from now on. Because if burned lumpy pancakes could make her laugh, then burned lumpy pancakes was what she would have. The custody process moved slowly, as Sarah had warned. There were home visits from social workers who looked around his modest house with critical eyes. There were background checks that dug up every mistake he'd ever made. There were interviews where he had to explain his past, his present, and his plans for the future. Through it all, Marcus refused to give up. When the social workers questioned his fitness as a parent, he showed them Emma's progress, the way she was starting to talk more, to smile more, to emerge from the shell she'd built around herself. When they pointed to his criminal record, he showed them the letters of recommendation from Emma's doctors, her nurses, even Detective Morrison. "This man saved that child's life," Morrison had written. "He has shown more dedication to her well-being than anyone I've seen in 23 years of law enforcement. If anyone deserves to be her father, it's Marcus Cole." But Marcus knew the hardest battle was still ahead. because Raymond Tate was still out there. And men like Raymond didn't let go easily. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 weeks after Emma had come to live with him. Marcus was at his welding shop when his phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Cole." The voice was unfamiliar, cold. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Marcus's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his grip on the phone tightening. "I think you do." Raymond Tate's voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but there was poison underneath. "My niece, Emma. You've been playing house with her, I hear. That's sweet, really touching." "She's not yours," Marcus growled. "She was never yours." "Oh, but she is. Legally, I'm still her guardian, and I want her back." "Over my dead body." Raymond laughed, and the sound made Marcus's skin crawl. "That can be arranged, Mr. Cole. That can certainly be arranged." The line went dead. Marcus stood in his shop, his heart pounding, his hands shaking with rage. Raymond was back. After weeks of silence, weeks of false hope that maybe he'd disappeared for good, Emma's abuser was back, and he wanted her. Marcus looked at the clock on the wall. Emma was at home with Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched her while he worked. She was safe. For now. But for how long? He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Whatever was coming, he would face it. He would protect Emma with everything he had, everything he was. Because that's what fathers did. Marcus drove home faster than he should have, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, Raymond's voice echoing in his head. That smooth, poisonous tone, that casual threat. The way he'd said, "my niece," like Emma was property, something to be owned and controlled. He pulled into his driveway and was out of the car before the engine fully stopped. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, her weathered face creased with concern. "Everything okay, Marcus? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Where's Emma?" "In her room coloring. She's been quiet today, but—" Marcus pushed past her, his boots heavy on the floor as he moved down the hallway. He found Emma exactly where Mrs. Chen said she'd be sitting cross-legged on her bed, with crayons scattered around her. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway, and her face immediately changed. "What's wrong?" she asked, her small voice tight with fear. "Did something bad happen?" Marcus forced himself to slow down, to breathe, to not let his panic infect her. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I just missed you." Emma studied his face with those two old eyes. "You're lying." The words hit him like a punch. 5 years old, and she could already read adults better than most people twice her age. That was what trauma did to children. It made them hyper-vigilant, always watching for the next threat, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed, and she immediately scooted closer to him, pressing against his side like she was seeking warmth. "Something happened," he admitted. "But I don't want you to worry about it. That's my job. Your job is to be a kid." "Is it Uncle Raymond?" Marcus's heart stopped. "Why would you ask that?" Emma's fingers twisted in the fabric of her shirt, a nervous habit he'd noticed before. "Because he always comes back. When I think he's gone, he comes back. And he's always angry when he comes back." The matter-of-fact way she said it made Marcus want to destroy something. "He called me," he said, deciding she deserved honesty. "But listen to me, Emma. Listen carefully. He's not going to hurt you. Not ever again. I won't let him." "He hurt my mommy's friend once," Emma whispered. "Before Mommy went to heaven. The friend tried to help me and Uncle Raymond hurt her bad. She had to go to the hospital." Marcus felt sick. What happened to her? She went away. She was too scared to stay. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone goes away when they get scared. Are you going to go away?" Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "No," he said fiercely. I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? I'm not scared of Raymond Tate. I'm not scared of anyone. And I'm going to keep you safe. Promise. I promise. That night after Emma fell asleep, Marcus made phone calls. The first was to Detective Morrison, who answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Raymond contacted you. Morrison's voice sharpened. What did he say? Marcus repeated the conversation word for word. He's coming for her. I could hear it in his voice. He's not going to stop. I'll put a patrol car on your street, Morrison said, and I'll reach out to my contacts, see if we can trace that call. Do not engage with him if he contacts you again, understand? Let us handle it. And if you can't handle it, Marcus. Morrison's voice was firm. I know what you're thinking. I know the kind of man you are. But if you do something stupid, you'll lose Emma for good. Is that what you want? The words cut through Marcus's rage like cold water. He thought of Emma's face, of her small hand in his, of the trust she was slowly learning to place in him. Morrison was right. If he went after Raymond himself, he'd end up in prison, and Emma would end up back in the system. No, he said quietly. That's not what I want. Then let me do my job. I promise you we're going to catch him. But the days that followed were torture. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every unfamiliar car that drove past his house made his heart race. Every unknown number that popped up on his phone made him tense. He hired a security company to install cameras around his property, changed the locks on his doors, and started varying his route to and from the welding shop. Emma noticed the changes. Of course she did. Why are there cameras now? She asked one morning over breakfast. Extra protection, Marcus said, like a superhero's secret base. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push, and he was grateful for that. The second call from Raymond came a week later. Still playing daddy, I see. That smooth voice made Marcus's skin crawl. It's adorable, really, but playtime's over. The police are looking for you, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. It's only a matter of time. The police? Raymond laughed. Do you have any idea how many times I've slipped away from the police? They're incompetent, all of them. No, this is between you and me, Mr. Cole, and my offer is simple. I'm not interested in any offer you have. Hear me out. Raymond's tone shifted, becoming almost businesslike. Emma's parents left a trust fund, a substantial one. I was supposed to manage it until she turns 18. But with you in the picture, that money is locked up in legal limbo. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. This is about money. You nearly killed that child, and it's about money. Everything is about money, Mr. Cole. That's how the world works. Now here's my proposal. You give up this ridiculous custody claim, I take Emma back, and everyone gets what they want. You go back to your quiet little life, and I get access to what's rightfully mine. She's not a bargaining chip, Marcus growled. She's a child, a human being. She's worth $300,000, Raymond said flatly, and I'm not leaving without her. The line went dead. Marcus immediately called Detective Morrison, relaying every word. The detective cursed under his breath. He's getting desperate, Morrison said. That's both good and bad. Good because desperate people make mistakes. Bad because desperate people are dangerous. Watch your back, Marcus. 2 days later, Sarah Mitchell called with news that made Marcus's blood run cold. Raymond filed for emergency custody, she said, her voice tight with frustration. He has a lawyer, a good one. They're claiming you're unfit, that you have a violent history gang affiliations, that you're using Emma for her trust fund. That's insane, Marcus exploded. I didn't even know about the trust fund until he told me. I know that, but the court doesn't. And unfortunately, Raymond cleans up well. He's presenting himself as a reformed man who made mistakes but has changed. He's claiming he left Emma at a supervised care facility that night, that someone else moved her to where you found her. He's lying. He left her to die in the snow. I believe you, but we need to prove it. Sarah paused. There's going to be a hearing next week. If Raymond's lawyer can convince the judge that there's reasonable doubt about your fitness as a guardian, Emma could be placed back with him temporarily while the investigation continues. Over my dead body. Marcus, please. We have to do this the right way. I've been gathering evidence, the hospital records, the police reports, testimony from Emma's doctors. But we need more. We need witnesses who can speak to Raymond's character, to his history of abuse. Marcus thought of what Emma had told him. About the friend who'd tried to help. About her going to the hospital, then going away. Emma said there was a woman, a friend of her mother's. She tried to intervene and Raymond hurt her. Maybe she'd be willing to talk. Do you have a name? No, but I'll find out. That evening, Marcus sat with Emma in the living room, trying to figure out how to ask without traumatizing her further. She was curled up on the couch with her bear, watching a cartoon about talking animals. Emma, he said gently, can I ask you something? She looked at him, instantly alert. What? The friend you told me about. The one who tried to help you. Do you remember her name? Emma's face went pale. Why? Because she might be able to help us. Help me keep you safe. For a long moment, Emma didn't speak. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Miss Jenny. Mommy called her Jenny. Do you remember her last name? Emma shook her head. She worked at the flower shop, the one with the purple door, but I don't know if she's still there. Marcus pulled out his phone and searched for flower shops in the area. There was only one with a purple door, a small place called Blooming Hearts on the east side of town. The next morning he drove there before work. The shop was small but cheerful, filled with the scent of roses and lilies. A woman in her 30s stood behind the counter, arranging a bouquet. She looked up when Marcus walked in, and her friendly smile faltered slightly at his appearance. Can I help you? She asked, her voice cautious. I'm looking for someone named Jenny. She used to work here, maybe still does. She knew a woman named... Marcus realized he didn't know Emma's mother's name. She knew Emma Tate's mother. The woman's face went completely white. Her hand, still holding a stem of roses, began to shake. Who are you? She whispered. Did he send you? No. Marcus held up his hands, trying to appear non-threatening despite his size. My name is Marcus Cole. I found Emma in the snow 2 months ago. I've been taking care of her ever since, and now Raymond Tate is trying to take her back. The woman Jenny set down the roses with trembling hands. Oh God, that poor baby. Is she okay? Is she safe? She's safe, for now. But Raymond's filed for emergency custody. He's claiming to be reformed, claiming he never hurt her. I need someone who can tell the truth about what he is. Jenny's eyes filled with tears. I tried, she said, her voice breaking. 3 years ago, I tried to report him. After what he did to Sarah, that was Emma's mother after she died, I could see what he was doing to that little girl. I tried to intervene and he... She touched her ribs unconsciously. He broke 3 of my ribs, told me if I ever said anything he'd kill me and make it look like an accident. But you're still here, Marcus said. You're still alive. And Emma needs you. You don't understand. Jenny was crying openly now. He's dangerous. He has connections, people who owe him favors. He's gotten away with things that should have put him in prison years ago. Then help me put him there. Marcus stepped closer, his voice intense. Help me make sure he can never hurt Emma again. I know you're scared, but there's a little girl who's counting on us. A little girl who's finally starting to believe that adults can be trusted. If Raymond gets her back... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Jenny wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What do you need me to do? Come to the custody hearing. Tell the judge what you know, what you've seen. what he did to you. He'll come after me. You know he will. And I'll protect you." Marcus met her eyes steadily. "I've spent my whole life running from responsibility, from commitment, from caring about anyone but myself. But that little girl changed me. She made me want to be better, to be someone worth trusting. I'm not going to let Raymond Tate destroy her, and I'm not going to let him destroy anyone else either." Jenny stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." The day of the hearing arrived too fast, and not fast enough. Marcus wore the same borrowed suit he'd gotten from Pastor Reynolds at the community church, a man who'd become an unexpected ally after hearing about Marcus's situation. The fabric felt foreign against his skin, but Emma had said he looked handsome, and that was all that mattered. The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had expected, and emptier. Raymond sat at a table across the aisle, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. He looked every inch the respectable businessman. His hair neatly combed, his expression somber and concerned. If Marcus hadn't known what lay beneath that polished exterior, he might have been fooled too. Raymond caught Marcus's eye and smiled, a small, confident smile that made Marcus's hands curl into fists. "All rise," the bailiff called out. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Hawkins presiding." The judge was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She settled into her seat and reviewed the papers before her, her expression unreadable. "We're here today to determine temporary custody of the minor child Emma Tate," she began. "Mr. Raymond Tate has filed for emergency custody, claiming that the current guardian, Mr. Marcus Cole, is unfit. Mr. Cole has counterfiled to maintain his guardianship and has presented evidence of abuse and neglect on Mr. Tate's part." She looked up. "This is not a criminal trial, but the evidence presented here will be taken into serious consideration. Mr. Tate, your counsel may begin." Raymond's lawyer was a shark in a three-piece suit, a man named Harrison Wells, who spoke with the kind of practiced smoothness that made everything sound reasonable. "Your Honor, my client readily admits that he made mistakes in the past. The stress of suddenly becoming responsible for his brother's child after the tragic accident, combined with financial pressures, led to a period of difficulty. But Mr. Tate has since completed rehabilitation programs, attended parenting classes, and demonstrated a genuine commitment to change." Marcus watched the judge's face, trying to read her reaction. It remained neutral. "Furthermore," Wells continued, "we have serious concerns about Mr. Cole's fitness as a guardian. His history with the Hellsangels motorcycle club, his arrest record, his lack of any experience with children, these are not minor issues. We believe Emma would be better served in the care of her biological family." When it was Sarah Mitchell's turn to present Marcus's case, she was just as polished, just as professional. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows a pattern of severe abuse and neglect spanning years. Hospital records document multiple injuries consistent with physical abuse, including a fractured rib that was never properly treated. Emma was found nearly frozen to death, abandoned in a snowstorm, wearing nothing but a summer dress. Since being placed in Mr. Cole's care, she has shown remarkable improvement both physically and emotionally." Sarah called witness after witness. Dr. Patterson testified about Emma's injuries and her recovery. Detective Morrison presented the police findings. The nurses who had cared for Emma spoke about Marcus's dedication, his nightly visits, his gentle way with her. Then Jenny took the stand. Her voice shook as she described what she'd witnessed: the bruises on Emma's small body, the fear in her eyes, the way Raymond would fly into rages over the smallest things, She described the night he'd attacked her, the way he'd promised to kill her if she ever talked. "He's a monster," Jenny said, tears streaming down her face. "He hurt that little girl for years, and he'll do it again if he gets the chance. Please, don't let him take her back." Raymond's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she had a personal grudge against his client, that her testimony was unreliable. But the judge's expression had shifted. There was something cold in her eyes now as she looked at Raymond. Then it was Marcus's turn. He walked to the stand on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The bailiff swore him in, and he sat down, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. "Mr. Cole," Sarah began, "can you describe the night you found Emma?" Marcus told the story: the snowstorm, the dark shape by the fence, the moment he realized it was a child. His voice grew rough as he described her injuries, the way she'd been so light in his arms, the desperate ride to the hospital. "And why did you stay?" Sarah asked. "You could have dropped her off and walked away. Why didn't you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because she needed someone," he finally said. "And I was there. I know I'm not what most people would pick for a father. I know I've made mistakes. But that little girl, she changed something in me. She made me want to be better." "What do you want for Emma's future?" "I want her to be safe. I want her to be happy. I want her to grow up knowing that she's loved, that she matters, that there are people in this world who will fight for her." Marcus's voice broke slightly. "I want her to have the childhood she deserves." Raymond's lawyer stood for cross-examination, his smile sharp. "Mr. Cole, isn't it true that you have a criminal record?" "Yes." "And you were a member of the Hellsangels for over 20 years?" "Yes." "A gang known for violence, drug trafficking, and other criminal activities." "I never participated in any of that," Marcus said steadily. "I joined the club because I was alone and looking for family. But I worked an honest job, paid my taxes, and stayed out of trouble. And yet you were arrested twice for assault. Bar fights. Both times the other guy threw the first punch. Charges were dropped." Wells leaned in. "Mr. Cole, do you really expect this court to believe that a man like you, a biker with a violent past, is better suited to raise a child than her own flesh and blood?" Marcus looked past the lawyer, past Raymond's smug face, to where Sarah sat at their table. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. "I expect this court to look at the facts," Marcus said. "Raymond Tate left Emma to die. I saved her life. He broke her bones. I helped her heal. He made her afraid of every adult she met. I taught her to trust again." He turned to face the judge directly. "I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be. But I love that little girl, and I will spend every day of my life making sure she's safe and happy. Can he say the same?" The courtroom fell silent. Judge Hawkins studied Marcus for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Raymond. "Mr. Tate, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Raymond stood smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, I love my niece. I made mistakes, yes, but I've changed. I've gotten help. All I want is the chance to make things right, to be the family Emma deserves." The judge nodded slowly. "I've heard the testimony. I've reviewed the evidence. This court will take a brief recess while I make my decision." The next 30 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He sat at the table, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, replaying every word he'd said, wondering if it had been enough. Emma wasn't in the courtroom. Sarah had thought it best to keep her away from the proceedings, but Marcus had promised to call her the moment he had news. She was with Mrs. Chen, probably pacing her own small circles, waiting. Finally, the bailiff called everyone back to order. Judge Hawkins returned to her seat, her face still giving nothing away. She shuffled through her papers, then looked up. In cases like this, the court's primary concern is always the welfare of the child. I have heard compelling testimony on both sides. However, the evidence of abuse and neglect on Mr. Tate's part is overwhelming. The hospital records alone paint a picture of systematic cruelty that no child should ever have to endure. She turned to Raymond, and her voice hardened. Furthermore, I find Mr. Tate's claims of rehabilitation unconvincing. His willingness to abandon a child in life-threatening conditions suggests a profound lack of basic human decency that no parenting class can fix. Marcus felt hope begin to bloom in his chest. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that full custody of Emma Tate be granted to Marcus Cole. Additionally, Raymond Tate is hereby prohibited from any contact with the child. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. The gavel came down. Marcus sat frozen, unable to process the words. It was over. It was finally over. Emma was safe. She was his. Across the aisle, Raymond's face twisted with rage. He started to rise from his seat, his lawyer grabbing his arm to hold him back. "This isn't over," Raymond hissed loud enough for Marcus to hear. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop me? That little girl is mine, and I always get what's mine." Two bailiffs moved toward him, and Raymond shook off his lawyer's grip, straightening his suit with forced calm. "You'll regret this," he said to Marcus, his voice low and venomous. "All of you will regret this." They led him away, and Marcus watched him go, the threat hanging in the air like poison. He had won the battle, but something told him the war was far from over. The drive home from the courthouse felt like floating through a dream. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against the custody papers in his jacket pocket, as if they might disappear if he didn't keep touching them. Full custody. Emma was officially, legally, permanently his daughter. Mrs. Chen was waiting on the porch when he pulled into the driveway, Emma standing beside her with that stuffed bear clutched to her chest. The moment Marcus stepped out of the car, Emma's eyes searched his face, desperate for an answer she was too afraid to ask for. Marcus knelt down and opened his arms. "You're staying with me," he said, his voice rough. "Forever. The judge said so." Emma didn't move for a heartbeat. Then she launched herself at him, her small body slamming into his chest with a force that nearly knocked him backward. She was crying, her tears soaking through his borrowed shirt, her fingers digging into his shoulders like she was afraid he'd dissolve if she let go. "Forever," she whispered against his neck. "Forever." Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "I knew it," she said. "I knew that judge would see the truth." Marcus stood up with Emma still clinging to him, her legs wrapped around his waist, her face buried in his shoulder. She felt heavier than she had when he'd first carried her out of the snow. Stronger, more solid, like she was finally beginning to believe she deserved to take up space in the world. "Thank you," Marcus said to Mrs. Chen, "for everything." "You don't thank family," she replied. "You just show up for them, and that's what you've done for that little girl." That night, Marcus made Emma's favorite dinner macaroni and cheese with the fancy breadcrumbs on top, something he'd learned from a YouTube video because he wanted to surprise her. They ate at the small kitchen table, Emma chattering about the cartoon she'd watched with Mrs. Chen, about the picture she'd drawn about everything and nothing. Marcus listened to every word, marveling at how much she'd changed. 3 months ago, she'd barely spoken. Now she talked constantly, as if making up for all the years she'd been too afraid to use her voice. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, her fork hovering over her plate. Marcus's heart still skipped whenever she called him that. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are the bad dreams going to stop now?" He set down his own fork, giving her his full attention. "What do you mean? You said the judge said I'm staying forever. Does that mean Uncle Raymond can't find me anymore? Does that mean the bad dreams will go away? Marcus reached across the table and took her small hand in his. The judge said Uncle Raymond can never come near you again. If he tries, the police will arrest him. You're safe now, Emma. Really safe. But the dreams don't know that. Her lower lip trembled. They still show him coming for me. They still show him being angry. Come here. Marcus pushed back from the table and patted his knee. Emma climbed into his lap, curling against his chest like she always did when she needed comfort. The dreams might take a while to catch up, but every time you have one, I'm going to be right there when you wake up. I'm going to remind you that you're safe, and eventually your brain is going to figure out that the bad times are over. Promise. Promise. The weeks that followed were a kaleidoscope of small moments and quiet victories. Emma started first grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from their house, her pink backpack almost bigger than she was. Marcus walked her to school every morning and picked her up every afternoon, watching as she slowly began to make friends, to come out of her shell, to become the child she'd never been allowed to be. There's a girl named Sophie, Emma reported one afternoon, bouncing on her toes. She has red hair and freckles, and she let me share her crayons. Can she come over to play sometime? Of course she can. Marcus said, his chest swelling with something he barely recognized as pride. The nightmares continued, but they came less frequently now. Once every night became once every few nights, then once a week. Each time Marcus was there, holding Emma, until the shaking stopped whispering reassurances, until her breathing steadied. You're doing amazing, kid, he told her one morning over breakfast. You know that... Emma looked up from her cereal, a milk mustache on her upper lip. I am... Yeah, you're the bravest person I know. Braver than you, Marcus laughed. Way braver than me. She seemed to consider this, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but you're pretty brave too. The compliment hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken in a bar fight. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus took Emma to the park. She'd been begging to try the big kid swings, and he'd finally agreed, though he stood close enough to catch her if anything went wrong. She pumped her legs with fierce determination, going higher and higher, her laughter ringing out across the playground. Look at me, Daddy, she shouted. I'm flying. I see you, he called back. Don't go too high. You're such a dad, a voice said from behind him. Marcus turned to find a woman about his age watching him with an amused expression. She had kind eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. That obvious? The hovering gives it away, she smiled. I'm Linda. My grandson's the one on the slide. Marcus. And that's Emma on the swings. She's beautiful. How old? 6. Just started first grade. The best age? Linda watched Emma for a moment. My daughter used to swing just like that. Fearless. Always pushing higher. They talked for a while, easy conversation about kids and schools and the exhausting joy of parenthood. It struck Marcus how normal it felt. How natural. 6 months ago, he'd been a loner who avoided human connection like it was a disease. Now he was making small talk with other parents at the playground. You seem surprised, Linda observed. By what? Marcus shook his head, laughing at himself. By all of this, I guess. Being a dad, having conversations at parks. I never thought this would be my life. Life has a way of surprising us. Linda's expression grew thoughtful. My husband died 3 years ago. I never thought I'd be raising my grandson alone. But here we are. I'm sorry. Don't be. He gave me 30 beautiful years, and now I have Michael. She nodded toward the slide where a small boy was climbing the ladder for the 10th time. We find joy where we can, right? Yeah, Marcus agreed, watching Emma soar through the air. We do. The call from Detective Morrison came on a Tuesday evening. "We found him," Morrison said without preamble. "Raymond Tate. He was picked up in Nevada trying to cross into Mexico." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "What happens now?" "He's being extradited back to Detroit. He'll face charges for child abuse, child endangerment, and a host of other things. Given the evidence we have, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." Relief washed over Marcus like a wave. "So it's really over?" "It's really over. That man is never going to hurt Emma again." After hanging up, Marcus sat quietly for a long moment. Emma was in her room working on homework with more enthusiasm than any first grader should reasonably have. He could hear her humming to herself a song from some cartoon she loved. He should tell her. She deserved to know that her monster had finally been caged. "Emma," he called, "can you come here for a minute?" She appeared in the doorway, her pencil still in her hand. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Marcus patted the couch cushion beside him. "I just have some news." Emma sat down, her eyes wary. She was always wary when adults said they had news. In her experience, news was rarely good. "The police found Uncle Raymond," Marcus said gently. "He's going to jail, Emma, for a very long time. He can never hurt you again." Emma was silent. Her small face went through a series of expressions: fear, confusion, hope, disbelief. "Really?" she whispered. "Really? And he can't get out, he can't come find me?" "No. The judge said he has to stay in jail for many, many years. By the time he gets out, you'll be a grown-up. And even then there are laws protecting you. He can never come near you again." Emma stared at him, processing. Then slowly her face crumpled, and she started to cry. Marcus pulled her into his arms, alarmed. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? This is good news." "I know," she sobbed. "I know it's good news. But I've been scared for so long. I didn't even know how scared I was until right now." And he held her, while she cried, years of terror and tension finally releasing from her small body. It was a healing kind of tears, he realized. The kind that washed things clean. "You're safe now," he murmured into her hair. "You're really, truly safe." "Because of you," Emma said, pulling back to look at his face. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something new in them. Something like peace. "You saved me, Daddy. You saved me twice." "You saved me too, kid. You just don't know it yet." The months that followed were the happiest of Marcus's life. He hadn't known it was possible to feel this kind of joy, this deep contentment that came from simply being present for another person. Every morning was a gift. Every bedtime story was a treasure. Every scraped knee and worried look and silly question was a privilege he'd never expected to have. Emma flourished. Her teacher sent home glowing reports about her progress, her creativity, her kindness to other children. She made friends easily now, her natural warmth finally free to shine without the shadow of fear dimming it. "Sophie's mom says I can go to her birthday party," Emma announced one afternoon, waving a pink invitation. "Can I go?" "Please." "Of course you can go." "And can we get her a present? Something really special?" "What did you have in mind?" Emma's face scrunched up in thought. "She likes unicorns. And purple. And she said she wants to be an artist when she grows up." "Then we'll find the perfect purple unicorn art supplies," Marcus said. "Sound good?" "Sound great." The party was held at Sophie's house, a modest ranch-style home in a neighborhood not unlike their own. Marcus had been nervous about dropping Emma off. It was the first time she'd be somewhere without him for an extended period. But she ran inside without a backward glance, already chattering with Sophie about cake and games. "She'll be fine," Sophie's mother assured him. Her name was Patricia, and she'd been nothing but welcoming since Emma and Sophie became friends. "They'll play, they'll eat too much sugar, they'll probably get glitter everywhere. Normal kid stuff." "Normal kid stuff," Marcus repeated. "That sounds perfect." He spent the 3 hours of the party in a state of mild anxiety, checking his phone constantly, even though Patricia had promised to call if anything was wrong. When he returned to pick Emma up, she burst out of the house covered in glitter and frosting her face alight with joy. "Daddy, it was amazing," she gushed. "We played pin the tail on the unicorn, and I won a prize, and the cake was purple, and we made friendship bracelets, and look." She thrust out her wrist where a lopsided bracelet made of colorful beads spelled out Emma plus Sophie. "That's beautiful," Marcus said, and meant it. On the drive home, Emma chattered non-stop about the party, about Sophie, about all the wonderful things that had happened. Marcus listened to every word, his heart so full it hurt. "Daddy," Emma said suddenly, her voice changing. "Yeah, I used to think parties were bad. Uncle Raymond said I didn't deserve them. He said I was too much trouble." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "That was a lie, Emma. You deserve every good thing in the world." "I know that now." She was quiet for a moment. "Because you showed me." That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat on the porch with a cup of coffee watching the stars come out. His phone buzzed with a message from his old friend Jake, one of the few Hell's Angels brothers he'd kept in touch with. "Heard you're doing the dad thing now. Proud of you, brother." Marcus smiled and typed back. "Thanks. It's the best thing I've ever done." A few minutes later, his phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah Mitchell. "Just wanted to check in. How are things going?" He thought about the question. About Emma's laughter. About the friendship bracelet on her wrist. About the peace that had finally settled into both their lives. "Things are good," he wrote back. "Really good. Better than good, actually. Things were wonderful. Things were exactly as they should be." Marcus finished his coffee and went back inside, pausing at Emma's door to watch her sleep. Her face was peaceful, one arm wrapped around her stuffed bear, the friendship bracelet still on her wrist. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered. She stirred slightly. "Good night, Daddy." He closed the door softly and headed to his own room, but not before stopping to look at the photos on the hallway wall. Emma's first day of school. Emma on the swings at the park. Emma blowing out candles on her 6th birthday cake. A life captured in snapshots, each one more precious than gold. A year ago, these walls had been bare. A year ago, his life had been empty. Now it was overflowing with love and laughter and all the messy, beautiful chaos of raising a child. Marcus had spent decades searching for something without knowing what it was. A purpose. A meaning. A reason to be more than just another guy taking up space in the world. He'd found it in a snowstorm, wrapped in a thin summer dress, barely clinging to life. And he would spend the rest of his days grateful for that cold, dark night that had changed everything. 2 years had passed since that winter night when Marcus found a broken child in the snow. 2 years of scraped knees and bedtime stories. 2 years of learning to braid hair and pack lunches. 2 years of becoming someone he never thought he could be. Emma was 7 now, all long legs and gap-toothed smiles. She'd lost her first tooth 3 months ago, and Marcus had fumbled through the tooth fairy routine with the help of a frantic midnight Google search. The dollar he'd slipped under her pillow had been met with such genuine wonder that he'd almost cried. "Daddy, look." Emma burst through the front door, waving a piece of paper over her head. "I got an A on my spelling test." Marcus set down the wrench he'd been using on his motorcycle and wiped his hands on a rag. "Let me see that." She thrust the paper at him, practically vibrating with pride. 20 words all spelled correctly with a gold star sticker, and "Excellent work, Emma," written in her teacher's neat handwriting. "This is amazing, sweetheart." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you. Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm one of the best spellers in the whole class. She says I should try the spelling bee next month. Do you want to—" Emma's face scrunched up the way it always did when she was thinking hard. "Maybe. Sophie's doing it too. But what if I mess up in front of everyone?" Marcus knelt down to her level, something he'd learned to do whenever they had serious conversations. "You might mess up. That's okay. Everyone messes up sometimes. The important thing is that you tried. Did you ever mess up at something important?" He laughed. "Kid, I've messed up more times than I can count. But you know what? Every mess up taught me something. Made me better. Made me ready for the next thing. Made you ready for me?" The question hit him right in the chest. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "Made me ready for you." Emma threw her arms around his neck. "Then I'm glad you messed up." That evening, they celebrated Emma's spelling test with pizza and ice cream, her favorite combination. She talked non-stop about school, about Sophie, about the class hamster that had escaped from its cage and caused chaos in the library. And then Mr. Henderson tried to catch him, but he's really old and slow, and whiskers ran right through his legs, and everyone was screaming, and it was the best day ever. Marcus listened, asking questions in all the right places, marveling at how animated she'd become. The silent, terrified child he'd found in the snow was gone, replaced by this bright, chattering miracle who filled his house with laughter and his heart with purpose. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice suddenly serious. "Yeah. Do you think my mommy and daddy can see me from heaven?" Marcus set down his pizza slice. They'd talked about her parents before, in careful, gentle conversations that he'd navigated with the help of a child therapist. But she rarely brought them up on her own. "I think they can," he said. "I think they're watching over you every day. Do you think they're proud of me like you're proud of me? I think they're the proudest parents in all of heaven." Emma nodded slowly, processing. "Sophie says I'm lucky because I have two daddies. My daddy in heaven and you." "What do you think about that?" "I think she's right." Emma looked at him with those green eyes that had once been so full of fear. "I love my daddy in heaven, but I love you too. Is that okay?" Marcus had to clear his throat before he could speak. "That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's perfect." The spelling bee was held on a Friday afternoon in the school gymnasium. Marcus sat in the front row, his large frame squeezed into a tiny plastic chair, surrounded by other parents who kept shooting curious glances his way. He was used to it by now. The tattoos, the leather vest, the general appearance of someone who belonged more in a biker bar than an elementary school event. But he didn't care what anyone thought anymore. He was here for Emma, and that was all that mattered. She stood on the stage with 11 other children, looking impossibly small under the harsh gymnasium lights. When she spotted him in the audience, her face broke into a nervous smile. He gave her a thumbs up. The competition progressed through several rounds. Kids misspelled words and walked off the stage with varying degrees of disappointment. Emma nailed every word thrown at her, her voice growing more confident with each success. "Beautiful," the moderator said. "Beautiful. Correct. Necessary. Necessary. Correct." By the final round, only Emma and one other child remained a serious-looking boy named Michael, who adjusted his glasses nervously between each word. "Emma," the moderator said, "your word is determination." Marcus held his breath. They'd practiced this one just last night. Emma had struggled with it, getting the I and E mixed up 3 times before finally getting it right. Emma closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and looked directly at Marcus. "Determination," she said clearly. DETERMINATION. Determination. The moderator smiled. Correct. Michael missed his next word, and just like that, it was over. Emma had won. The gymnasium erupted in applause, and Marcus was on his feet before he knew it, clapping so hard his hands stung. Emma ran off the stage and straight into his arms. "I did it, Daddy. I did it. You did it," he said, lifting her off her feet. "I knew you could." "I was so scared," she admitted. "But then I saw you, and I remembered what you said about messing up, and I just did it." That's my girl. Later that night, after the celebration dinner, and the retelling of every moment of the spelling bee to anyone who would listen, Emma grew quiet. They were sitting on the porch swing, watching the stars come out the way they did every clear evening. "Daddy, yeah, sweetheart, remember when you found me in the snow?" Marcus's arm tightened around her slightly. "I remember. I was so cold, and everything hurt, and I thought I was going to die." Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, in that way children sometimes had when discussing terrible things. "I thought nobody was ever going to find me, that nobody cared if I was alive or dead." "Emma, but then you came." She looked up at him, her green eyes bright in the dim light. "You picked me up and you carried me, and you kept saying, 'Hold on, just hold on.' I could hear you. Even when everything else was dark and cold, I could hear your voice." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. "I didn't know if you could hear me." "I could. And I remember thinking, this person sounds like they care. This person sounds like they're not going to let me go." She snuggled closer against his side. "And you didn't. You never let me go. I never will. I know." She yawned, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. "That's why I'm not scared anymore. Because I know you'll always be there." Marcus sat in the quiet darkness long after Emma had fallen asleep, thinking about how far they'd both come. The man he'd been 2 years ago would barely recognize himself now. That man had been closed off, angry at the world, convinced that he was meant to be alone. That man had built walls around his heart so thick he'd forgotten they were there. Emma had demolished those walls without even trying. She'd needed him, and in meeting that need, he'd discovered something he'd been missing his whole life. Purpose. Connection. Love. The weeks rolled forward, each one bringing new adventures and challenges. Emma decided she wanted to learn to ride a bike without training wheels, and Marcus spent 3 Saturday afternoons running alongside her, his hand on the back of her seat, ready to catch her if she fell. "Let go," she demanded on the 4th Saturday. "I can do it. You sure? I'm sure." He let go. She wobbled for a heart-stopping moment, then found her balance, pedaling furiously down the sidewalk. Her whoop of triumph echoed through the neighborhood. "I'm doing it, Daddy! I'm doing it! I see you!" he called, jogging to keep up. "You're amazing!" She rode all the way to the end of the block before stopping, her face flushed with accomplishment. Did you see how far I went? I saw everything. Can we do it again?" They rode bikes until the sun went down, Emma getting more confident with each pass. By the end, she was doing figure eights in the driveway, showing off for Mrs. Chen, who had come out to watch. "That child is something special," Mrs. Chen said to Marcus as they watched Emma perform another victory lap. "You've done good, Marcus. Real good." "She's the one who's special," he replied. "I'm just along for the ride." "Don't sell yourself short." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. She needed someone to believe in her. You were that someone. That's not nothing. The anniversary of the night Marcus found Emma came and went. He didn't mention it to her, she didn't need to relive those memories, but he marked it privately, sitting on the porch after she fell asleep, thinking about how a single decision to investigate a dark shape in the snow had changed everything. Sarah Mitchell came by for her quarterly check-in, though the visits had become more social than official by now. "You two are thriving," she observed, watching Emma show off her latest artwork. "I've never seen a case turn out this well." "She's the one doing all the work," Marcus said. "I'm just providing the space." That's exactly what she needed. Space to heal, to grow to be a child. Sarah smiled. "You know, when you first walked into my office, I wasn't sure about you. A Hell's Angel wanting to take in a traumatized little girl. It seemed like a recipe for disaster. What changed your mind?" "The way you looked at her. Even then, before you really knew her, there was something in your eyes. A determination. A fierceness. Like you'd already decided she was yours and nothing was going to change that." Marcus nodded slowly. "I didn't understand it at the time. Didn't know why I couldn't walk away. But now I think we were meant to find each other. Like two broken pieces that fit together." "That's a beautiful way to put it." "Don't tell anyone," he said with a slight smile. "It'll ruin my reputation." Sarah laughed. "Your secret's safe with me." Summer arrived with its long days and firefly nights. Emma finished first grade with honors and immediately began counting down the days until second grade started. She was nervous about having a new teacher, about making new friends, about all the unknowns that came with growing up. "What if nobody likes me?" she asked one night, her voice small in the darkness of her bedroom. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Why wouldn't they like you?" Because of what I am, where I came from." "And where's that? A bad place, with a bad person?" Marcus felt his heart clench. They'd worked so hard to help Emma understand that none of what happened was her fault, but some scars ran deeper than others. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Where you come from doesn't define who you are. Your past is part of your story, but it's not the whole story. The person you're becoming, the kindness you show, the bravery you have, that's who you are." "But what if people find out about Uncle Raymond? What if they think if anyone ever makes you feel bad about your past, you come tell me." "Okay. But Emma, most people aren't going to care about where you came from. They're going to care about who you are right now. And right now you're the smartest, funniest, most amazing 7-year-old I know." Emma sniffled. "Really?" "Really. Now close your eyes and get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." "Okay." She yawned, already drifting off. "Daddy, yeah, I love you." 3 simple words that still had the power to bring Marcus to his knees. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world." The final days of summer brought one more surprise. Marcus had been saving money for 2 years, quietly building a fund for Emma's future. But when an opportunity came to buy a small house with a backyard just outside the city, a house with a garden and a swing set and room for a dog, he couldn't pass it up. "Where are we going?" Emma asked as they drove to an unfamiliar neighborhood. "You'll see." He pulled into the driveway of a modest but charming house with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. A sold sign stood in the front yard. "What is this place?" Marcus got out of the car and walked around to open Emma's door. "This is our new home." Emma's eyes went wide. "Our home, like we're going to live here." "That's the plan. Want to see inside?" She was out of the car and running up the front walk before he finished the question. Marcus followed at a more measured pace, keys in hand, heart full of anticipation. The house was empty, their voices echoing off bare walls as Emma explored each room with increasing excitement. "There's a backyard and a tree. Can we get a swing for the tree?" "Already ordered one." "And my room is this, my room, it's so big." "All yours, you can decorate it however you want." Emma spun in circles, arms outstretched, laughing with pure joy. Then she stopped, suddenly serious, and walked over to where Marcus stood in the doorway. "This is real," she asked. "This is really happening. It's really happening. And we'll live here forever, you and me, forever." Emma threw her arms around him, holding on tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for giving me a home." Marcus held her close. This child who had changed everything. This daughter who had saved him just as surely as he'd saved her. "Thank you for letting me be your dad." They stood there in the empty house that would soon be filled with laughter and love, with messy breakfasts and bedtime stories, with all the ordinary magic of a family built not from blood, but from choice. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A new beginning. A new chapter. A new chance at the life neither of them had ever dared to dream about. Marcus looked down at Emma, at her bright eyes and trusting smile, and felt a peace settle over him that he'd never known existed. "Ready to start our next adventure?" he asked. Emma grinned, gap-toothed and radiant. "Ready." They walked out onto the porch and sat on the steps, watching the stars come out one by one. The night was warm, the air sweet with the scent of summer flowers, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. "Daddy." Emma's voice was sleepy content. "Yeah. Remember when you asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up?" "I remember." "I changed my answer." "Oh yeah. What do you want to be now?" Emma leaned her head against his arm, her eyes fixed on the first bright star of the evening. "I want to be like you. I want to help people who are scared and alone. I want to show them that there are still good people in the world." Marcus felt tears slide down his weathered cheeks, and for once he didn't try to hide them. "That's the best answer I've ever heard." "Because it's true." She yawned, burrowing closer against his side. "You showed me, Daddy. You showed me that broken things can be fixed, that lost people can be found, that love is stronger than fear." They sat together in the gathering darkness, father and daughter, two souls who had found each other against all odds. The road ahead would have its challenges. There would be teenage years and college applications and all the complications of growing up. But whatever came, they would face it together. Because that's what family did. And they were family now. Not by blood, not by obligation, but by something far stronger and more enduring. By choice. By love. By the simple, unshakable truth that they belonged together. Marcus looked up at the stars spreading across the velvet sky and felt for the first time in his 54 years of living completely and utterly at home. His hands had trembled that night in the snow when he'd found her. They had shaken with cold and fear and something he hadn't understood. Now he knew what it was. It was the beginning of everything. It was the moment his life truly started. It was love arriving in the most unexpected form, wrapped in a thin summer dress, barely breathing, waiting to be saved. And in saving her, he had saved himself. That was the truth Marcus carried in his heart, as the stars wheeled overhead, and his daughter slept peacefully against his side. Some people spend their whole lives searching for their purpose. Marcus Cole found his in a snowstorm in a child's broken body in hands that would not stop trembling until they held her safe. And he would never let go.